Neo-Nazi sympathisers, some throwing Nazi salutes, showed up in support of Kelly J. Keane-Minshall.
Liberal MP Moira Deeming was at the Let Women Speak anti-trans rights rally when more than 24 neo-Nazis joined the protest.
Transgenderism must be eradicated.
Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth.
Well, you know, it really scares me, actually, especially with the banning of drag shows or certain books or even the Statue of David. When they start saying, let's get rid of this whole genre of entertainment or this whole section of books, you're erasing people who have developed these, whose culture depends on them to find out who their identity is and the history of it all.
Yeah, it is really fucking scary. I think that LGBT issues that are happening overseas, especially since America is kind of like the forefront of just trans pushback right now, it kind of does overshadow what's happening here, because I know probably more about what's happening over there at the moment than I do in Australia.
And like, on one hand, I always think, oh yeah, but it's not happening here, like, you know, it's really awful for those people, but at least we're not there. But a lot of Western countries tend to follow in America's footsteps a lot of things politically, and you can see it happening here too.
It's so disheartening to see that there's such an emphasis on America, especially like within news and media, and then there's not much of what's actually happening here unless you dig deeper.
Because of globalization, what happens in America with their laws and legislation is extremely influential on what happens in the rest of the world. Everything that they do, we see, especially with recently. And whether or not the legislation is happening within Australia, the thoughts and ideas are still being brought overseas via Facebook and those other social media sites.
What's the net good of the internet? Like, is it good that we've provided such safe space for everyone else, but it's also congregating like all of these hate groups? I heard about the Nazis in Melbourne over social media, primarily. I think far-right extremism is obviously, there's such a cesspool for on the internet, because you have this phenomenon of people feeling alienated and genuinely like angry at all this change that's happening, particularly men. Even though neo-Nazism is quite prevalent, especially across the West and in Australia, I think that it's just a response to the wave of acceptance and amazing things for queer people.
Over the past 2 weeks, the World Pride Festival has sprawled across Sydney, but today, our famous Harbour Bridge took centre stage.
Sydney has hosted hundreds of events to celebrate World Pride, but it seems our city saved the best to last.
Closed in both directions as the rainbow flag was carried from the north side to the city.
The representation that I grew up with was very negative and homophobic and transphobic. A lot of my friends have gotten very good at reading their own story that they want into characters that exist already. Characters that are like not meant to be queer or not meant to be autistic, and seeing themselves in that, and really just getting a lot of joy out of relating to those characters.
My favourite experience in the queer community would probably be doing drag, especially just all the people I've met, kind of like making chosen family, really.
The importance of awareness with the queer community is that people basically know that we exist and that we are humans, and be able to be who we are without any judgment.
I am a product of the 90s. I would be your Generation X, and when I was a teenager and early 20s, you still didn't say LGBT out loud. You still didn't kind of shout to the rooftops you were a lesbian. There were still hanky codes and thumb rings and things like this to give a sign. We didn't have the World Wide Web. I think there will always be a need for more, sadly. We will always have miles to go before we sleep, but we have come leaps and bounds, and it's important to realize the history that came before to get us here.